Oliver Montgomery stood at the edge of the pristine college campus, the sun casting long shadows over the manicured lawns and elegant, ivy-clad buildings. It had been 5 years since he graduated, and the place felt both familiar and foreign. He had returned for a charity gala, one of many social obligations that came with being part of the Montgomery family. As he navigated the crowd, exchanging polite greetings and handshakes, his eyes fell on a striking figure across the room. Emma Turner. She was dressed in an elegant black dress, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. They had never been more than acquaintances during their college days, but Oliver remembered her well. She was always in the company of wealthy men, always seemingly involved with those from influential families. Their eyes met, and a flash of recognition passed between them. Oliver gave a polite nod and turned away, focusing on the conversation he was having with an old professor. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling of Emma's gaze on him. It wasn't long before she approached, a confident smile on her lips. "Oliver Montgomery," she said smoothly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Emma Turner," he replied, matching her smile. "It's been a while. How have you been?" "Oh, you know," she said with a casual wave of her hand. "Living life, exploring opportunities. How about you? Still running the family empire?" "Something like that," Oliver said, his tone guarded. "So, what brings you here?" "The gala, of course," she said, but there was something in her eyes that suggested otherwise. "And it's always nice to reconnect with old acquaintances." Their conversation was interrupted by the start of the evening's speeches, but the brief exchange had left Oliver uneasy. Emma had always been charming, but there was an edge to her that he couldn't ignore. A few weeks later, Oliver found himself thinking about Emma more often than he cared to admit. Their paths crossed again at another high society event, this time in a more intimate setting. They exchanged pleasantries, and before he knew it, they were having dinner together, talking about their college days and their lives since then. Emma was captivating. She spoke with passion about her interests and dreams, her laughter infectious. Oliver found himself genuinely enjoying her company, but a small voice in the back of his mind reminded him to stay cautious. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable date, Emma broached the subject of meeting his family. "Oliver, we've been seeing each other for a few months now," she said, her tone casual but her eyes intense. "I'd love to meet your family." Oliver hesitated. "It's a bit soon, don't you think? My family is particular about who they meet. It's just how they are." Emma's face fell slightly, but she quickly recovered. "I understand. It's just that I really like you, and I want to get to know every part of your life." Oliver smiled, but the conversation left him feeling uneasy. The next few weeks passed in a blur of dates and social events, but Emma's requests became more insistent. She wanted to borrow his family's car, stay over at his apartment, and even mentioned using his credit cards. "Emma, I can't just lend you the car," Oliver said one evening, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "It belongs to my family, and I have rules to follow." "It's just a car, Oliver," she said, her tone sharp. "I don't see why it's such a big deal." "It is a big deal," he replied firmly. "And I don't understand why you're pushing so hard for it." Emma backed off, but the tension between them lingered. Oliver confided in his older brother, James, who listened carefully. "She sounds intense," James said thoughtfully. "And familiar. Didn't you say you remembered her from college?" "Yeah, she was always around wealthy guys," Oliver said. "But I never really knew her." James did some digging and discovered a troubling pattern. Emma had a history of dating wealthy men, manipulating them to gain access to their assets, and creating chaos when things didn't go her way. She had even been involved in a few scandals, though nothing had ever been proven. When Oliver confronted Emma about his findings, she was furious. "How dare you investigate me?" she shouted. "I thought you trusted me." "I did," Oliver said quietly. "But your actions don't add up. I had to know the truth." Emma stormed out, and Oliver hoped that would be the end of it. But a few days later, she showed up at his apartment, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to be part of your life. I didn't mean to push so hard. Oliver sighed, torn between his feelings for her and the warnings from his brother. Emma, I need some time to think. That night, as Oliver tried to make sense of everything, he felt a growing sense of dread. Emma was more than just a charming woman, she was a potential threat to his family's stability. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. Unbeknownst to Oliver, Emma was already planning her next move. She had planted a listening device in his apartment, and overheard the conversation he had with James. Enraged, she decided to escalate her tactics, determined to bring down the Montgomery family at any cost. The stage was set for a battle of wits and wills, and Oliver had no idea just how high the stakes would become. The next morning, Oliver woke up with a heavy heart. The previous night's revelations and Emma's sudden apology weighed on his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. As he went through his morning routine, his phone buzzed with a message from Emma. Can we talk? I really need to explain. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe later that day. Emma was already there when Oliver arrived, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked genuinely remorseful, but Oliver couldn't let his guard down just yet. Oliver, please hear me out, she began, her voice quivering. I've made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you. I was desperate to find stability, and I thought you could provide that. Oliver frowned. Why me, Emma? Why not someone else? Emma took a deep breath. I grew up in a chaotic household. My parents were always fighting about money, and I vowed never to live like that. I've been dating wealthy men because I wanted security, not because I'm a gold digger. I thought I could make a real connection with you. Oliver's expression softened, but he remained cautious. You have to understand how this looks from my perspective. I want to believe you, but your actions have raised too many red flags. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. I get it. I just hope you can give me a chance to prove myself. Oliver sighed. We'll see. For now, let's take a step back and figure things out. As they parted ways, Oliver couldn't help but feel conflicted. Emma's story had struck a chord, but he knew he couldn't ignore the warnings from his brother. Meanwhile, James continued his investigation, determined to protect his younger brother. He dug deeper into Emma's past, uncovering more troubling details. Emma had a history of manipulating men, but her methods were more sophisticated than initially thought. She often used emotional manipulation, playing the victim to gain sympathy and trust. James decided to confront Emma directly. He found her at a trendy bar downtown, surrounded by a group of friends. She looked up, surprised to see him. James, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Emma excused herself from her friends and followed James to a quiet corner. What do you want? I know what you're up to, Emma, James said, his eyes narrowing. I've seen your pattern. You manipulate men to get what you want, and then you move on. Emma's face paled. You don't understand. I've changed. I care about Oliver. Maybe you do, James said, his voice softening. But your past actions say otherwise. If you truly care about him, you'll leave him alone. Emma stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. I can't do that, James. I love him. James sighed. Then prove it. Stop pushing him to introduce you to the family. Stop asking for his car and his credit cards. Show him you're different. Emma nodded, but James wasn't entirely convinced. He knew she was capable of saying anything to get what she wanted. A few days later, Oliver received a call from his father, William Montgomery, a stern yet fair man who had built their family empire from the ground up. Oliver, we need to talk about this girl you've been seeing. Oliver's heart sank. Dad, I'm handling it. Are you? William's voice was skeptical. Your brother has been keeping me informed. We've dealt with people like her before. You need to be careful. I know, Dad. I'm trying to figure things out. Well, don't take too long, William warned. Our family's reputation is at stake. After the call, Oliver felt the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him. He decided to confront Emma once and for all. That evening, Oliver met Emma at his apartment. She seemed nervous, sensing the tension in the air. "Emma, we need to talk." Emma nodded, sitting down on the couch. "I know, Oliver. I've been thinking a lot about what you said." Oliver took a deep breath. "I need to know the truth, Emma. No more lies, no more manipulations. Why are you really with me?" Emma looked down, her hands trembling. "I told you, Oliver. I want stability. But I also care about you. I didn't plan on falling for you, but I did." Oliver's gaze softened. "I want to believe you, Emma. But you have to understand how hard it is for me." "I do, I'll prove it to you, Oliver. I'll back off, give you space. I just hope you'll see that I'm sincere." As they talked, Oliver felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Emma was telling the truth. But just as he was about to let his guard down, his phone buzzed with a message from James. "Meet me. Urgent." Oliver excused himself and headed to meet his brother. When he arrived, James looked grim. "What's wrong?" James handed him a file. "I found more on Emma. She's not just after your money. She's connected to a network of scammers. They target wealthy families, using people like Emma to gain access." Oliver's blood ran cold as he flipped through the documents. It was worse than he imagined. Emma wasn't just a gold digger, she was part of a much larger scheme. Back at his apartment, Emma waited, a sly smile playing on her lips. She had overheard Oliver's conversation with James and knew her cover was blown. But she had one last trick up her sleeve. When Oliver returned, she played her final card. "Oliver, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaking. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," she said, tears streaming down her face. Oliver felt the ground shift beneath him. "What?" Emma nodded, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "I just found out. I didn't want to tell you like this, but you needed to know." Oliver was stunned, his mind racing. Was this another manipulation, or was she telling the truth? He didn't know what to believe anymore. The stage was set for a battle far more complex than Oliver had anticipated. Emma had upped the stakes, and the Montgomery family was in for the fight of their lives. The news of Emma's pregnancy hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over every thought and action. Oliver was torn, struggling to reconcile his feelings for Emma with the damning evidence his brother had presented. As days turned into weeks, the tension grew. Oliver decided to keep the pregnancy news from his family until he could verify its truth. He needed to be sure. One evening, Oliver found himself sitting in the grand library of the Montgomery mansion, lost in thought. His father, William, entered the room and sat beside him. "Son, you've been distant. What's going on?" Oliver sighed. "Dad, I need your advice. What if someone close to you isn't who they seem to be?" William's eyes narrowed. "Are we talking about Emma?" Oliver nodded. "There's more to her story. I've discovered she's connected to a network of scammers." William leaned back, his expression grim. "I had a feeling. This family has enemies, Oliver. People who want to exploit our wealth and power. You need to be cautious." "I know, Dad. But there's something else. She claims she's pregnant." William's face hardened. "We need to get to the bottom of this. If she's lying, we'll expose her. If she's telling the truth, we'll handle it. But either way, we can't let her manipulate us." Oliver felt a surge of resolve. "I'll find out the truth, Dad. I promise." Meanwhile, Emma was plotting her next move. She had overheard Oliver's conversation with his brother and knew her position was precarious. She needed to act fast to secure her place in the Montgomery family. She decided to visit a doctor, ensuring she had a genuine pregnancy test to show Oliver. She needed him to believe her, to buy herself more time. At the same time, James was digging deeper into Emma's background. He discovered that she had been married before, to a wealthy businessman who mysteriously disappeared. The case was never solved, but there were whispers of foul play. James knew he had to tread carefully. He contacted a private investigator, hoping to uncover more about Emma's past. Oliver and Emma met at a small park the next day. The air was tense, filled with unspoken questions. "Oliver, I went to the doctor," handing him an envelope. "Here's the proof." Oliver opened it, his heart pounding. The test results were positive. He looked up at Emma, his mind racing. "I don't know what to say." "Just believe me, Oliver," Emma pleaded. "I love you. I want to build a future with you and our child." Oliver nodded, but he remained wary. "We need to take things slow. There's a lot we need to figure out." Emma smiled, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something that made Oliver's unease grow. A few days later, James's private investigator, Mr. Thompson, called with urgent news. "Mr. Montgomery, you need to see this," handing James a file. James opened it, and his eyes widened. "This is unbelievable." The file contained evidence linking Emma to several disappearances of wealthy men. She had a history of marrying, manipulating, and then eliminating them to inherit their fortunes. James knew he had to act fast. He called Oliver and arranged a meeting at a secluded location. When Oliver arrived, James wasted no time. "Oliver, you need to see this," showing him the file. Oliver's face turned pale as he read through the evidence. "This can't be true." "It is. Emma is dangerous. We need to protect ourselves." Oliver felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "I can't believe I almost fell for her lies." "We need a plan," James said. "We need to expose her without putting ourselves at risk." That evening, Oliver confronted Emma at her apartment. His anger was barely contained as he handed her the file. "Care to explain this?" Emma's eyes widened as she looked through the documents. She quickly composed herself, tears streaming down her face. "Oliver, this isn't true. Someone's trying to frame me. Don't lie to me, I know the truth." Emma's demeanor changed. She became defiant. "Fine, believe what you want. But I'm pregnant with your child. You can't just walk away." Oliver clenched his fists. "We'll see about that." Meanwhile, William Montgomery had his own plans. He contacted an old military friend, Captain Harris, known for his unconventional methods of handling delicate situations. "Captain, I need your help. There's a woman trying to destroy my family. We need to make sure she's stopped, permanently." Captain Harris nodded. "Consider it done." The next day, Oliver and James met with their father and Captain Harris. They laid out a plan to expose Emma and protect their family. "We'll gather concrete evidence and present it to the authorities." Oliver felt a sense of relief. "Thank you, Captain." As the Montgomery family prepared to execute their plan, Emma was growing desperate. She realized she was running out of time and needed to act fast. She decided to escalate her scheme, planning to blackmail the Montgomerys by leaking false information to the press. She hoped the threat of a scandal would force them to comply with her demands. But as she set her plan in motion, she had no idea that the Montgomerys were one step ahead. The day of reckoning arrived. The Montgomery family, armed with irrefutable evidence, confronted Emma in a high-stakes showdown. "Your game is over, Emma," William said, his voice steely. "We know everything." Emma tried to feign innocence, but the evidence was undeniable. Her true nature was exposed, and her plans crumbled before her eyes. "You won't get away with this," she hissed, her eyes filled with venom. As Emma was led away in handcuffs, Oliver felt a mixture of relief and sadness. He had loved her once, but now he saw her for who she truly was, a predator who preyed on the vulnerable. But amidst the chaos, he realized something important. His family had stood by him, protecting him when he needed it most. And for that, he was grateful. The Montgomerys had faced a cunning adversary and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. And as they moved forward, they knew they would always be prepared to defend their family against any threat, no matter how insidious. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more intriguing stories.